And the top our news here at 6 o'clock, an age-old dream becoming a reality. A local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
Oil is one of the most important commodities in the world we have today. When transformed into petroleum, it is a key energy source used in vehicles, planes, heating, asphalt, and electricity. Outside of being a crucial energy source, petroleum is used in plastics, paints, chemicals, tape, and so much more. And altogether, the oil industry brings in a whopping $3.3 trillion. So, it's hard to imagine a world without oil. But what happens when someone decides to threaten the entire industry as a whole? Stanley Meyer, born August 24th, 1940, lived most of his life in the Columbus East Side area and briefly moved to Grandview Heights, where he attended high school and completed his education. After his graduation from high school, he swiftly joined the military and briefly applied to Ohio State University. Ever since Stanley was young, he was always determined to build something new. His twin brother, Stanley Meyer, quoted, "We were always building something. We went out and created our toys." Stanley Meyer was the owner of many different patents, which ranged all the way from banking, oceanography, and even cardiac monitoring. He was a religious man and would usually credit God for all of his works he had done so far. His favorite phrase was "praise the Lord" and "pass the ammunition." By 1989, the Patent Office gave Stanley special preference due to his innovations, and most of them were usually accepted. Stanley's patents were usually put into action 8 months later after its submission, which was very quick, as patents usually take more than a year to be applied. The Patent Office thought Meyer's technologies and applications were technologically advanced and ahead of his time. To date, Stanley Meyer applied more than 200,000 patents. So, it's clear to see from these accounts that Stanley Meyer wasn't just your average 2-bit inventor. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Edison. Anyways, we'll save that for another time. Now, I can talk about Stanley Myers all day, but for you to really understand who he was as a person, I'm gonna include this quick clip of him back in the 90s talking about his invention and how it works. So, without further ado, here is Stanley Myers. Enjoy.
We zijn hier bij Stanley Meyer, nu buiten zijn garage. En we hebben net zijn water-powered auto naar buiten gereden, waar er nu wat over gediscussieerd wordt. En er zijn dingen aan gewijzigd en zo, dus dat kan op het moment niet lopen, maar we mogen hem dus wel helemaal bekijken.
Just explaining how this thing
Go ahead.
does.
Yeah, can you zoom in back in here? Are we on?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now this is the hydrogen computer system, which was designed in order to be able to process the fuel, to produce the hydrogen gas from water and do it economically and be able to control its firing, go in the engine to allow the Volkswagen engine to run off of hydrogen. There's a lot engineering design that went into this, even though that this is our systems engineering approach. The hydrogen computer system you see here will be miniaturized down to several IC chips, which will allow us to give the economics to apply to a conventional car. Over here, there's very unique design features that had to be developed in order to develop the water fuel cell as a retrofit energy systems to conventional cars. We had to go ahead and develop the laser, what we call the laser distributor, as you see right here, which is put between the conventional rotor cap and that of the rotor assembly. And primarily what this does, this sets up the electronic signals that goes back and triggers the computer system in order to allow the car to run successfully on hydrogen. In order to run this engine off of water, we've also had to learn the ability to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal the fossil fuels. We did this by simply now pulling off a portion of the exhaust gas that's coming from the engine, as you see through this tube here, that's going through this electronic regulator that's hooked up to the hydrogen computer. And basically what's happening is that as the ambient air is going into the engine and going through the burning process, it produces the non-combustible gases that retards the speed by which the oxygen atom unites to hydrogen and bring on gas ignition. So by simply using the non-combustible gases coming from the exhaust of the engine, we now modulate and control the speed by which that oxygen unites with the hydrogen, and therefore we are adjusting the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal that of gasoline or fossil fuels or even diesel fuel. And that gave us the number one retrofit capabilities of retrofitting the water fuel cell technology to an existing engine. And we do this electronically. The unit that you see right here, we call this a gas processor. And basically what we're doing is we're ionizing the ambient air gases that is now going into the process. And this allows us to trigger and use the hydrogen fracturing technology and tapping into a higher energy yield coming.
Meyer started working on this project 4 years ago. He's not a scientist. He isn't even a chemist. In fact, he never graduated from college. Myers was determined, he says, to design something to protect this country from oil embargoes.
And we have calculated that if we take the dune buggy from Los Angeles to New York, we would roughly use 22 gallons.
On one fateful day, March 21st, 1998, Stanley Meyer was mysteriously murdered. While in a restaurant, along with his brother, Stephen Meyer, and 2 Belgian investors, it is claimed that Stanley was murdered by poisoning. Stephen Meyer remembered the events of what happened on that fateful evening. In the words of Stephen Meyer, Stanley took a sip of cranberry juice, then he grabbed his neck, bolted out the door, dropped to his knees, and vomited violently. He ran outside and asked him what's wrong. Then Stephen recalled, Stanley Meyer said, "They poisoned me." That was his dying declaration. After a 3-month investigation, the police concluded that Myers died of a cerebral aneurysm. But many people who knew Myers thinks that he was murdered, as his invention could have massively paved the way for free energy. Other evidence that he was murdered was that Myers' patents attracted much unwanted attention from governments, mysterious visitors from overseas, and lucrative buyout offers. His brother, Stephen Meyer, even said that the 2 Belgian investors who were with Stanley on the day of his murder knew something. He quotes, "I told them that Stan had died, and they never said a word." He recalls absolutely nothing, no condolences, no questions. "I never, ever had the trust of those 2 men ever again," said Stephen Meyer. The perpetrator, along with his motives behind the murder, were never found.